Right, so this is a big one. We're going to take all the knowledge that we have so far about user location, table views, advanced segues and maps, as well as permanent storage, and we're going to put it all together to build the Memorable Places app. And the app looks like this. So our first page is pretty simple. We've got a default location there of the Taj Mahal, and if I tap on that, it will jump through to the maps screen on the app, and we'll see a pin right in the Taj Mahal, which if I tap on, it will show me the name of this favorite place. There we go. And now if I go back over to my places, and by the way, I'm going to show you how to set up this back button system using something called a navigation controller just before you start building the app. So if I tap the plus button, then that allows me to add a new memorable location. And so if I do a long press anywhere on this map, a pin will appear, and then that location will be saved to my memorable places. So if I go back and take a look, there it is. I can also delete places that I don't want. So if I want to get rid of the default Taj Mahal place, I can just swipe left. I can just swipe left and press delete, and that's gone. And then, very importantly for an app like this, everything is stored permanently. So if I shut the app down with a double tap of the home key and a swipe up, and then open the app up again, it will remember the places that we stored previously. There we go. It's a really cool app and great fun to make, but I would recommend just watching me create the navigation controller, which just makes it a little bit easier to set up this navigation system. All right, so here we go. Back over to Xcode, and as usual, a new project. So as usual, we'll select single view application. I'll call the app Memorable Places. Save it on the desktop. And I'll just very quickly show you how we're going to set this app up a little bit differently to how we've done it before. So we're going to bring in something called a navigation controller this time round. So a navigation controller comes with a root view controller, which is a table view, and it's really designed to have a table view as the basis of your app and then be easily able to navigate to other view controllers from that table view. So to see it in action, we're going to select the navigation controller and select the identity inspector and make that the initial view controller. So when the app launches, it will be the navigation controller that it launches first. Note, however, that the navigation controller is not a view controller. We don't actually see it at any point. It just controls the navigation. And I'll show you how it does that in a moment. In order to bring this new view controller within the navigation controller, I'm going to add a segue using a bar button item. But notice that you can't drag a bar button item directly onto the navigation bar there because it goes down to the toolbar at the bottom. So I'm going to undo that, and the way I'd recommend bringing a bar button item in is actually dragging it into the scene descriptor here under where it says root view controller, and that will then drag it to the left. I want mine on the right, so I'm going to bring it down, and that gives you the bar button item on the right. And then I'm just going to add in a segue. Maybe I'll do it from there. So control drag into the new view controller. And there we go. And you can see that as soon as we do that, the new view controller gets a navigation bar at the top. So we've brought it under the ownership, essentially, of the navigation controller, or under the control of it. So just before we run the app and make sure that it works as we want it to, I'm just going to add a title for this view controller. So this is going to be where I'm going to show the map. So I'll call it the map view controller. Okay, let's have a quick look, and then I'll give you a chance to pause the video and make the app for yourself. Here we go. So there's our root view controller, and if we tap on the item button, then we get the map view controller and a lovely built-in back button as well, which makes our life very easy. All right, so I thought it was worth showing you that as another way of creating navigation between view controllers. Now it's time to create the app. So best of luck. Off you go. Okay, hope that was fun. I'm going to begin by setting up the permanent storage on our initial view controller. So the one on the left, view controller over here. And this is going to be storage for the places themselves. So we're going to have obviously our two view controllers here. This first one is going to list all the user's favorite places. And the second is going to be a map to show the user their favorite places and to give them an opportunity to add new ones. So I'm going to start by making a couple of small changes to our view controllers here. So first off, our map view controller, I'm going to rename that to something a little simpler. I'm just going to call it map. And then over here, the root view controller, you need to rename that over here. You actually need to select root view controller from the scene, and then you change the title there. So I'll call that places. So this is going to be where all the user's favorite places are listed. And then while I'm here, I'm going to select my item, and that's going to be an add symbol. So that's going to be where the user can add a new place. And while we're here, I'll also just give this segue an identifier. We'll call it to map. And I think that's all we'll need for now. Later on, we'll need to add the map itself, but we'll focus on our places view controller for the moment, which you may notice we don't have a Swift file for yet. So let's add that in. So we'll do that in the usual way, creating a new file, Cocoa Touch class, and we want this one to be a subclass of UI table view controller, so that we get all of the table classes that we need to control the table here, and I'll call it places view controller. And then we'll save it as usual inside the app. There we go. Oh, let's put it up there for some reason. Let's just drag it down. There we go. So then we just need to link the places view controller to that particular class. So click on the identity inspector and then select places view controller. There we go. We would normally add in our outlets, but you can see both of those have already been added. So that's already done for us. Okay, so let's set up our table view. You can see we've got some default code here that we don't really need. And we've got a number of sections here, which again is not critical, but we only want one section. So let's just return one. Number of rows in section. Temporarily, I'll use 4. So then let's define our cell, and we'll do it in the way that we're familiar with. So let's cell equal UI table view cell. Then we're going to create that with a certain style. UI table view cell style dot default, as we're used to, and the reuse identifier is my usual one, cell. Next, as we're used to, we'll set the text label text, and here I'll just put the row number, which we'll get from index path dot row. There we go. So now we should have the table. Just before we run it, I'm going to add the code to set up the segue. So we want a segue to happen whenever anyone taps on a row on the table. So we do that with did select row at index path. And here I think that needs to be an override because it's already defined within UI table view controller. And we want to action a segue. So we're going to use perform segue with identifier. And if you remember, the segue that we created was this one here from the plus, and the identifier was to map. So I'll just copy that over, add it in, and the sender, we don't need to send that, so we can just write nil. All right, so we've set up a table in a whole different way this time, using a table view controller and editing pre-existing methods rather than creating them ourselves. We should now have a table which, when we tap on any of the items in the table, it jumps to the second view controller, or the map view controller. Of course, at the moment it doesn't pass any information, but it will do very soon. So let's just give that a go. So if I tap on row 2, it jumps to the map. Super. So we've got our segue in place. Okay, so now I'm going to start saving the data for our places. So I'm going to store this in a places variable, and you'll notice I'm creating a global variable here. As I said in the previous video, that's not necessarily best practice, but for a small app like this, it's definitely not going to cause any major problems, and it does make the coding much more straightforward. So this is a tricky enough app at this point of the course anyway, so I'm just going to have a global variable there to keep things relatively simple. If you want to avoid the global variable though, feel free. You'll just have to pass it back and forth between the view controllers. All right, so what we need to save about each place is obviously the latitude and longitude, and we also need some kind of name to show the user where it is. So I'm going to save that as an array of dictionaries, and the dictionary is going to have 2 strings, and initially it will be empty like that. Now, ideally, we don't want the user to be shown an empty array of places, so we'll check to see if places count is equal to 1 and places 0 count is equal to 0. That essentially means we don't have anything in our places array. We just have this empty dictionary here. So if that's the case, we're going to remove the empty dictionary, and we're going to add in a sample place. And here we'll see the data structure that I'm thinking of. So we'll have a name, and the name for this particular place is going to be the Taj Mahal. We'll have a latitude, which is, I believe, 27.175,277. And we'll have a longitude, which is 78.042128. There we go. So that should give us one default place which should allow us to view that in the table. And then we'll update the text label and we'll do a little check just to make sure that the element of the array that we're checking has a name before we display it here on the row itself. So we're looking at places index path.row name, and we want to check that that is not nil. And if it's not, then we'll set the text label text to be places index path dot row name. Okay, so running that right now will likely return in a blank table because it will run the app and set up the table based on that definition of the array. So I'm going to fix that by adding an outlet for our table. In the Places view controller. So here, let's just select Places view controller. And then I want to take my table view and create an outlet to it. There, I'll just call it table. And I can then update the table content once places has been updated. We can do that with table.reload data. Wonderful. So now we should have one item in our table, and that will be the Taj Mahal. But more importantly, we've built a data structure that we can use to store the items that the user wants to save within the app. And there we go. So there's our default Taj Mahal showing correctly. Okay, so now I think it's time to add in our map view and make it so that when we tap on the Taj Mahal, not only does it jump to the map, but it displays the Taj Mahal itself. All right, so let's go back over to main storyboard and bring in our map view or map kit view. Then I'm going to stretch it full screen, give it a bunch of constraints, and then we need to be able to pass the information about the active place to the new view controller. So I'm going to save another variable called active place. And initially I'm going to set it equal to -1. And in fact, we'll set active place back to -1 every time the table is loaded. And then we'll set active place here to be equal to index path dot row. And then we'll be able to access active place over in viewcontroller.swift. And for now, we'll just print it to the console to make sure that everything is transferring correctly. Just before we test that out though, let's just set up our map. Otherwise we'll get a crash when we try and run the app. Or at least when we try and segue to the new view controller. So we'll need the viewcontroller.swift file, and then we'll bring in our outlet for the map. We'll set up the delegate for the map. We'll import map kit. And we'll add MK map view delegate to our types in the view controller class. All right. So now we should be able to jump from our default Taj Mahal entry over into the map view, and we'll see an empty map, but more importantly, the active place will be printed to the console, so we'll know which item the user has tapped on. All right, let's give it a go. So we'll tap Taj Mahal, there we go, over to the map, and we get a 0. Fantastic news. And just to check, if we click the plus, that will still go to the map. And interestingly, that's still 0 there. I suspect that issue is because our code up here is in viewDidLoad, which isn't actually called when the back button is pressed. So let's add a viewDidAppear method, as we saw earlier on in the course, and just check that out. That should now work. So viewDidLoad is not actually run every time a view is displayed. If the back button is pressed, then viewDidLoad won't be run, but viewDidAppear will always run when the view appears. So now, if I tap Taj Mahal, we get our map and our 0 down the bottom there. And if I go back and press plus, we get a -1. Fantastic. So this is now happening properly every time that first view controller is loaded. Excellent. So now it's a matter of adjusting our map to display our active place. So we're going to want to check first off if active place is not equal to -1. So if that's the case, then we do have an active place, and we're going to need to get the details to display it on the map. So we'll just add a little note to ourselves, get place details to display on map. So let's do a few if statements just to check that we have all the details that we need, and we're not going to have a crash if for some reason our active place doesn't have a name and a latitude and a longitude. So if places.count is greater than active place, so we need that to be the case. If, for example, they click on active place number 1, then we need places.count to include a number 1, so it'll have to have a count of either 2 or more. So this will check that we can use places active place. Then we'll have a few if let statements. So if let places active place name. So we're going to set up a variable called name, which will be equal to that. We'll also need a latitude. So that will be places active place lat, and lon, which will be places active place lon. So next we're going to create 2 more variables. So one is going to be latitude, which is simply going to be a double version of lat, because lat is currently a string from which we won't be able to create our coordinate. And similarly, longitude will set to be double lon. All right, now this time, to keep my code as brief as possible, I'm going to set up my span. straight away from an MK coordinate span, and I'm just going to type in directly 0.05, 0.05. Then I'll set up my region, which is of course an MK coordinate region with a center of the coordinate that we haven't actually created yet. So let's just create our coordinate. So this is a CL location coordinate 2D created from latitude and longitude. So the center then of our region is coordinate and the span is span. Almost there. So then we're going to set self.map and set the region to our region, and animated will set to be true. Wonderful. So we'll just run that in the background and give it a check. But while it's going, let's set up our annotation. Which is going to be at the center of the map. So that's going to be an MK point annotation. Let's have a quick look. Here we go. So Taj Mahal, with any luck, that will zoom in on the Taj Mahal location. And there we go. That looks good. It's not quite at the center. Maybe my coordinates are a little bit off, but it's close enough. Okay, so then we set the annotation coordinate to be equal to our coordinate. Set the annotation title to be equal to name. And finally, add the annotation to the map. All right. So we've done a lot of careful checking there, and I don't think there's anything that could possibly happen in our app that could therefore cause this to crash. So here we go. We'll tap on Taj Mahal, and with any luck, there we go. We've got our pointer pretty close to where the Taj Mahal is. In fact, pretty bang on. It's interesting that that's not quite in the center of the map, but I actually quite like it lower down there. I think that works quite well. Wonderful. And just to check, of course, if we tap on the pin, it does indeed give the name. Excellent. So now we can display locations correctly to the user. The next job is going to be to allow the user to add locations themselves with a long press. So we're going to allow this regardless of whether or not they're looking at an active place. So let's create our UI long press gesture recognizer, which is a UI long press gesture recognizer created with a target, which is the view controller or self, and then the action. I'll have long press again, same as before. And then, as before, we'll set the minimum press duration to be 2 seconds. And we'll add the gesture recognizer for this gesture to the map. Okay, great. Then I'll just create the long press method. And this is going to need a gesture recognizer, which will have a type of UI gesture recognizer. But for now, I'm just going to print long press. And just before we run that, we do need to go back and use the new syntax for a selector, which is hash selector, and then our view controller, and then the name of our selector or our method, which is long press with a gesture recognizer. All right, so let's have a quick check. Make sure the long press works okay, and then we need to add the code to work out the location of the long press and indeed the address. And if we can find everything, then we'll save it as a new place in the places array. So here we go. Let's tap on Taj Mahal. And then we'll try our long press. And there it is. Excellent. So long press is up and running. So let's write our code to get our location. So we'll start off with a touch point, which is going to be the gesture recognizer dot location, and that's going to be in the map, just as before. And then I'm going to have a new coordinate, which is from the map. We use the convert method, and the coordinate that we're going to convert from is the touch point, and we're converting it to, I've got the wrong one there. I want to convert it to coordinate from the map. So that should give us the coordinate. So for now, I'm going to do two things with that. I'm going to print it so that we're sure that it has the right information on it. And I'm going to add an annotation for it. So we'll add a new annotation, mk point annotation. Then we'll set the coordinates of the annotation to be our new coordinate. Then I'll set the annotation title to be, for now, just a temp title. And finally, we'll add it to the map. Add the annotation. All right. So we're just going to run that to check and make sure that that is all working as we expect. We should get the new coordinate printed to the console and an annotation added to the map where we do the long press. So here we go, tap on Taj Mahal, and then I'm going to do my long press. And there we go, there's our pin, and you can see we've got the coordinate there and the right title as well. Fantastic. One small thing I've noticed there is that even though I only did one long press, it's picked it up twice. So I'm going to get round that by doing a check to check for the status of the long press. So we can look at if gesture recognizer.state is equal to UI gesture recognizer state dot began, then do all of that, and essentially that will only do all of this once, even if someone holds down for say 4 seconds. All right, so we're getting pretty close. Now it's just a matter of getting the title. And I'm going to attempt to get the title by geocoding or reverse geocoding the address. So let's do that here. So we're familiar with this now, CL geocoder. dot reverse geocode location. The location is the new coordinate. Then double click to get the completion handler. Place marks is our array, and then error, just in case there's an error. So if there is an error, if the error is not nil, then we'll just print the error. Else, we'll create a variable placemark if we can, which will be equal to placemarks 0, which is an optional because there may not be a value for it. Just before we continue, yes, these are slightly different types. So we need a CL location, and we've got a CL location coordinate 2D. So let's just quickly convert that. We can do that by creating a location, which is going to be a CL location, and we can just create that from a latitude and longitude, and we can get the latitude from new coordinate dot latitude and the longitude from new coordinate dot longitude. There we go, and then we can use location instead of new coordinate there, and that gives it the right type. Okay, so here I'm going to set up a variable called title, which will initially be an empty string. So similar to what I did a couple of videos ago. And then we'll check to see if we can access placemark, just placemark dot subthoroughfare. Then we'll take title and append placemark dot sub thoroughfare to it, and a space while we're at it. And also, if we can get placemark dot thoroughfare, we'll add that to the title. And we can force unwrap both of those because we've checked to see that they're not nil. Okay, so if that's the case, then we'll have a title which will be the subthoroughfare or the number followed by the road name. And then we'll check, once that's all done, to see if title is empty. And if it is, that means that something's gone wrong here and we haven't got any results. It might be that there's no address data for that particular location, or there's a problem with the internet connection. But either way, if that's going to be the case, we'll set title to and then added, and then we'll put the date in. So we can do that very easily with ns date. There we go. And then we'll add the annotation there using title as the title. And just before we run and check it, there's one more thing to do, and that's to append this new data to the places array. So if you remember, we already did an append over in places view controller, so I'm just going to copy that over. And so the name is going to be title. The latitude is going to be a string of new coordinate.latitude. and the longitude is going to be a string of new coordinate dot longitude. And while we're here, we'll just check that that's all worked out by printing the places array. Okay, so that's one of those times when we've added a lot of code. Could be something that goes wrong, but it's all reasonably straightforward. So we should now start off with a blank title and then attempt the reverse geocode. If it's successful, that will update the title to the first line of the address. If it's not, then the title will become added and then the date. Then we'll add to the annotation and append the details to the places array. Okay, fingers crossed. Let's give it a look. So here we go. Let's try once again with the Taj Mahal. And then while the map is loading, we'll do a long press. And there we go. You can see the new pin right there. And it didn't get an address successfully, but it has put the date on there, which is not too bad. Let's try and pick somewhere a little more built up and see if it returns an address for us there. Excellent. There we go. So the app is working exactly as desired. And then with any luck, if we tap back to places, our new locations should be shown on the table. And there they are. Wonderful. So we're getting pretty close now. There's only two things left that I want to add to our app. And one of them is when the user clicks the plus button, we want to take them to their current location rather than the location of one of their previous places. Well, actually, let's just quickly check that when we tap on a different place, it does indeed zoom us in on that place rather than the Taj Mahal. And it does. Superb. Right. So you'll remember we checked for active place not being -1 there. So I'm actually going to cheat slightly and look for when active place is equal to -1 and then pop an else in there. So this is where we're going to add our code to center the map on the user's location. So let's jump straight into what we need to do to make that work. So first off, go to build phases, link binary with libraries, and add the core location framework. Next, jump down to info.plist and add a row. I'm going to do it the scrolly way to avoid me making mistakes. So privacy, location always, and also privacy, location when in use. So again, I don't need that one, but when in use, so we can show you where you are. All right, fabulous. Now back over to viewcontroller.swift. And here we're going to import core location. And we're going to add a CL location manager delegate. There we go. All right, so then as before, we're going to create our manager, which is going to be a CL location manager. And then we only need to actually use it right here. So let's update manager.delegate, set that to the view controller or self. Then we'll set the desired accuracy to be KCL location accuracy best. And then we'll set manager dot request in use authorization and start updating location. Excellent. So now we can scroll down underneath all of that and underneath the long press method as well. And let's grab the did update locations method. And I'm going to go straight into it this time. And just to show you how you can do it in very few lines or relatively few lines, we'll create a location, which is going to be a CL location coordinate 2D. And we'll make that from a latitude, which will be locations 0 dot coordinate dot latitude, and same for longitude, locations 0 dot coordinate dot longitude. Then we'll set up the span, which same as before will be MK coordinate span, created from a latitude delta of 0.05 and a longitude delta of 0.05. Then we'll create our region. It's going to be an MK coordinate region based on center of location, locations 0, and a span of span. And then we're just going to update the map to set the region to our region, and animated will be true. So it's up to you whether you like doing it that way or not. It's definitely fewer lines of code. Oops, but we do need a CL location rather than a CL location coordinate 2D. Ah yes, sorry, that should be location rather than locations 0. So it's up to you whether you prefer to use that sort of code. I think the previous way, although it's more verbose and more lines, it is clearer and easier to read than trying to read that. But that's a matter of coding style, and I'll leave that up to you. So here we go. We'll tap the plus, and it asks us to share the location, which is a good sign, and then with any luck it will zoom on. I'm not sure what I'm doing at the moment. Is it a bike ride? It is. Let's take a look. There we go. Fantastic. So that's zooming along, and if I choose a location to do a long press on, and there we go. And then if we jump back to our places view, then the title correctly appears. Fabulous. So we're pretty close now. So now I'm just going to add the facility for users to remove items from their list, which we can do quite easily. We did it with the to-do list app. And as you might remember, we do it by first setting can edit row at index path. And that's just return true, which enables the user to edit the rows. And then we use commit editing style, and we check to see if editing style is equal to UI table view cell editing style dot delete. Then we'll remove it from the places array. So we'll remove it at the position index path.row, and then we'll update the table. There we go, and I suspect, there we go, we need overrides here because we're in a table view controller, so these functions or methods are already defined for us. Okay, so let's just give that a quick try. So now I should be able to swipe left on Taj Mahal and delete, and it's gone. Fabulous. So we're almost there. The one final feature that we really need in this app is permanent storage. Without permanent storage, the places are not going to be very memorable because the app has to stay open or the variables will be forgotten. So what I'm going to do is add the places to permanent storage here initially, and then there'll be a number of other places that we'll need to add them as well, but only one place that we need to restore them, and that is actually right here. So here we go. User defaults dot standard to get the standard user defaults, and we want to set, and the value of the thing that we want to set is the places array, and the key is places. Simple as that. So that will save the places array for us, and then I'm going to restore the places array every time we run this method, so every time we load the table essentially. And I'm going to do the restore using user defaults dot standard dot object, and the key is of course places. Now the important thing here is we need to cast this to the type that we need, which is what's defined up here, but without the parentheses, because we're not creating it here, we're just defining what we want to cast this to. So I'll create a variable called temp places, which will be equal to that, and if that works, then we'll let places be equal to temp places. So if we've already saved something, then it's going to restore it and update our places array to take that value. So then all we need to do is every time the places array is updated, we need to update the user defaults array as well. So when the row is deleted, where is that? There it is. So there, the places array is updated. So we need to update user defaults as well. And then I think there are two places here. So let's update user defaults there. And actually, no, I think that's the only place here that the places array is set up. It's only in the long press method. Brilliant. So let's try that out. With any luck, we should now find that we're able to store our favorite places permanently. And unless we find any nasty bugs, that should be our app pretty much done. Okay, so I'm going to click the plus button to take me over to my map, and then just pick a point on there, do a long press, and there we go. There's my new favorite place. Wonderful. Let's go back and just check that it's there. It is indeed. It's looking good. Okay, so now the big question is, when we open up the app again, will my new saved place be there? And there it is. Wonderful. So there was a lot of pretty complex stuff there, but nothing really new. It was just using the skills that you've covered so far in the course to create a really quite powerful app which stores data permanently, allows the user to add any place they like from a map, and then view it again whenever they like. Brilliant. So I really enjoyed that one. I hope you did too. And as always, I hope you managed to do a fair bit of it yourself. We're actually going to move on to a completely different topic now, away from location and maps and towards playing audio.